Okay, this is the structure for, let's just check this is working. Okay, I think it's working. Right, structure for the 52 mark question. You will have to adjust your structure depending on the question. But you can basically answer the question the following way if you're really stuck. So look at the research process. So looking at the different elements of the research process, you could look at it in the following way. You could look at the aims and basically copy those out from the pre-release material. You could look at the social background of the researcher, and these can be discussion of possible issues rather than definite points. So you can talk about social background in terms of social class, age, gender and ethnicity of the researchers. You can talk about how that may affect the research and how that could have an impact in different ways. You could refer to the PERV-G concepts, especially issues like validity. An example might be that if the social class of the researchers was from lower economic status backgrounds, they might be better able to empathise with the research subjects, generate a better rapport, and more valid and accurate data about fatherhood might be discovered. In that sentence, I've mentioned 3 or 4 main things. I've mentioned the concepts in the research process. Secondly, I mentioned the particular issue of the methods and the process carried out in this particular study. So the methods could be mentioned, like in the interviews, they might get more validity because they're from a similar background, they build a rapport, get more valid data. Study. I've mentioned the study because I've mentioned the researchers, and I've mentioned what they're studying. And that's the context. Context, the topic of fatherhood, or changes to and the meanings of fatherhood. So I've got to try and mention these 4 main things. With the methods and the concepts, I can also mention the methodologies. So for example, I could say that the background of the researchers being the same might generate more validity, and interpretivists might see this as useful to achieve greater empathy. The positivists might be concerned about a loss of objectivity where it's not so scientific because it might be biased because of the values of the researcher and their background affecting the way the research is conducted and the data and how it's analysed. Then you could move on to sampling. With sampling, you could talk about how the sample method and the actual nature of the sample itself as a small portion of the target population could affect the research outcomes. The key issues here are representativeness and generalizability, and you need to understand the difference between the two. We could talk about how with the sample there may be more representativeness because they try to get a fairer cross-section of people from different backgrounds. This would make it more typical of the whole target population, which in this case was fathers and parents and children, and they wanted to get information from families. You could argue that representativeness might be decreased because of the fact that there are some missing groups from the sample, like some ethnic groups. So in terms of the class, age, gender and ethnicity of the sample, it might lack representativeness because Bangladeshis were missing. It might lack representativeness because middle class people were not studied. The researchers were interested in changes to fatherhood and meanings, but that it might be important to discover how middle class or upper class people consider fatherhood to be important and how they define it. Generalizability, the extent to which we can apply the results to the whole target population, may be increased because they try to get different numbers from different groups, try and get a typical proportional sample. Might be decreased because there were some groups not included in the sample. So it might be harder to apply the results about fatherhood. Advantages. It depends what the question says, how you deal with this section. If it says mixed methods, then you could focus on issues like triangulation, methodological pluralism, cross-checking and comparing results, looking at results regardless, or methods regardless of whether you're a positivist or an interpretivist, to try and get the best results possible, which is called fitness for purpose. The positivists would like the quantitative elements of the methods in the mixed methods approach. The interpretivists would like the qualitative methods, like the descriptive detailed information from the semi-structured interviews. The time diaries with the numbers might be more useful to the positivists. The individual methods chosen, like semi-structured interviews, time diaries, videos, these could be analysed as well as part of the answer for a mixed methods question, or as part of the answer for a question about qualitative methods, or as a part of the answer to a question about qualitative mixed methods, or as for an answer on a question about one of these particular methods. Whichever the question, you have to deal with the main point in the question, the main keywords in the question first. That's your strategy. Semi-structured interviews, you can prompt and probe for more information and gain more validity. Interpretivists would say this could help you achieve Verstehen, or empathy from the point of view of the individuals. Semi-structured interviews are less time-consuming than unstructured interviews, although in this case, the study on fatherhood seemed to involve long, time-consuming interviews, so practical advantages might not be as strong as with questionnaires. There will be some quantitative data from the semi-structured interviews, and so the positivists might value this for the extra reliability and the ability to replicate some of the data. However, in this case it seems like they mainly use the time diary data and discuss that in the interviews. The time diaries feature some qualitative and quantitative data. There's some brief quantitative data, how many hours, time spent, but also qualitative data describing the quality and the nature of the activities between parents and children, fathers and the kids. This could be seen as advantageous by positivists because it might offer some reliable quantitative data. It might enable positivists to identify patterns and trends, identify cause and effect relationships between patterns of data. For example, looking at the time diaries, we might see like lots of time is spent with the children. We might see that as caused by the great meaning attached to fatherhood, which might be demonstrated in the interviews. So meanings cause behaviour. And it might enable positivists to say that we can establish laws about human behaviour. In other words, we can predict the future behaviour of human beings. If we can see that people spend a lot of time with their kids and they attach a great meaning to it and have a closer relationship with their children, perhaps that could be a result of culture rather than nature. That might help us establish